The wind came in cold off the prairie, cutting sharper than any knife, and it curled around the empty railroad station like it was looking for someone, to haunt. Wooden boards creaked. Rusted metal groaned. And on a half-rotted bench beneath the overhang, Clara Holden sat alone, wrapped in a faded gray shawl that had once belonged to her mother. The wool had thinned with age, but she pulled it tighter all the same, her fingers stiff, chapped, and red from the cold. Her boots, second-hand and ill-fitting, didn't do much to keep out the frost that seeped up from the ground. The hem of her dress, ivory once, now dulled with the dust of travel, trailed through a patch of melting snow, soaking up the wetness like it craved it. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She just sat there with her back straight, eyes on the horizon, waiting for something that wouldn't come. The letter in her pocket crackled when the wind shifted. She'd read it enough times to know every word by heart. Dear Miss Clara Holden, I believe in second chances. I ain't a man with much to offer, but I got a ranch, a roof, and a need for company. If you'd have me, I'd be honored to call you wife. Yours in hope, Everett M. Hollis. Hope. That was the word that had hooked her, like a barb in the heart. Hope that maybe, even at 43, she could start again. Hope that she wasn't too late to matter. But the train had long since come and gone. The porter had tipped his hat and gone home. The station master had locked the office and disappeared into the town. And Clara had stayed, too proud to cry and too ashamed to leave. She had told herself she'd wait one more hour. Then another. And another. Now the sky had turned the color of bruised lavender. Night was crawling over the land like a slow, bitter tide. And she was still there, waiting. Hoofbeats. She blinked, sat straighter, and turned her head. A horse and rider came over the rise, not at a gallop, but a slow, steady trot. The man in the saddle wore a wide-brimmed hat and a coat dusted with trail dirt. He rode like someone who knew both hardship and rhythm, like he'd been born on a horse and never quite came off. His face came into view as he drew closer, square-jawed, weathered, eyes shaded but alert. Clara didn't know him, and he didn't look like a man searching for a bride. He reined in beside the platform, his horse snorting as it pawed the ground. "You waiting for someone?" he asked, voice deep, worn smooth by wind and silence. Clara hesitated, then nodded just once. "Train already came," he said. "I know." His eyes flicked over her dress, her shawl, the small satchel at her feet. "They late?" "Not any more," she said softly. "Just not coming." He dismounted, not in a hurry, but with the calm of a man who didn't like to leave things untended. He tied off his horse, walked up the 2 wooden steps, and stood just far enough to be polite, close enough to be curious. "I'm Caleb Rowe," he said. "Came to pick up supplies. Feed store, left my order by the station door." He jerked a thumb toward the sacks stacked near the wall. "Didn't expect company." Clara offered a thin smile. "Didn't expect to be company." He studied her a moment longer, then reached into his coat and pulled out a tin flask. "Coffee," he said, unscrewing the top. "Hot." "Just barely." "Want some?" She hesitated, then nodded. He handed it to her without ceremony. She sipped. It was strong and bitter and beautiful. She almost wept. "You're not from around here," he said, more a statement than a question. "No." "Let me guess. Came all this way to marry a man you never met." She stiffened, fingers tightening around the tin. "Is that so obvious?" He shrugged. "Only folks who wait at the station these days are runaways, drunks, or hearts too hopeful for their own good. You don't smell like whiskey, and you ain't running." She laughed, a brittle sound that caught her off guard. "Then I suppose I'm the third kind." He glanced at her dress again. "He left you here?" "No note. No word. Nothing." "That's low," he said. Clara stared out at the darkening horizon. "I should leave. Go back east. Or somewhere. But I don't have the money. Not anymore. I gave everything to get here." Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. "You got family?" "Dead. Or distant enough it's the same thing." "You got anywhere to sleep tonight?" Clara shook her head slowly. He looked toward his wagon, then back at her. "Listen," he said, voice slower now, careful. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Got 2 kids. farms holding together with twine and prayer. I didn't come looking for a wife. Hell, I wasn't even looking for company. But I can't just leave you here. She met his eyes for the first time. I'm not Charity, she said. He nodded. Didn't say you were. I don't want pity. Then don't take it, he replied. Take the seat. I'll get you warm food and a roof for the night. After that, we figure things out. She looked down at the tin flask, then back at him. You sure? No, he said, almost smiling. But it's too damn cold to think straight. She rose slowly, wincing as her knees cracked. He took her satchel. She allowed him, just barely. They walked to his wagon in silence. But at the last step, she paused. Why are you doing this? She asked. He didn't look at her, just tightened the reins. Because no one should be left behind at a place like this, he said. Then, after a breath, almost like it surprised even him. And maybe I just didn't want to be the kind of man who rides past anymore. As the wagon pulled away from the station, the wind howled behind them, but Clara didn't look back. The letter in her pocket felt lighter somehow, like a burden finally loosened. She didn't know where the road led now. But for the first time in days, she wasn't alone on it. The town of Dust Hollow wasn't the sort of place you stumbled upon. It sat nestled between two worn hills, surrounded by fields that had once grown wheat, but now hosted more dust than grain. The wind carried the taste of iron and old earth, and the church bell sounded more like a sigh than a call. Everybody knew everybody, and if they didn't, they made sure to find out before sundown. Clara Holden felt the weight of eyes before the wagon even reached the main street. Caleb Rowe, sitting beside her with the reins in hand, said nothing, but she could see the way his jaw tightened. Not at her, but at the knowing that came with rolling back into town with a woman folks didn't expect. At the general store, two men paused in stacking barrels. One nudged the other. Whispered words didn't need to reach Clara's ears for her to understand. She kept her eyes on her lap, hands folded too tightly, while the wagon creaked along. The children saw them next. A group of schoolboys playing marbles outside the teacher's house stopped mid-turn, watching with slack mouths and wide eyes. A freckled girl dropped her slate board and whispered, "Is that the bride?" The church steeple loomed overhead as they passed. The preacher's wife, Mrs. Cantrell, looked out from her front window, lips moving like they were already forming prayer or judgment. Sometimes the two were hard to tell apart. When they reached Caleb's homestead, Clara saw it for the first time in full light. A square, low-slung house made from river stone and timber, roof patched in places, but sturdy. A fenced yard, 2 goats, a henhouse leaning slightly to one side, and beyond it, acres of brown earth waiting for spring. There was a narrow porch with 2 chairs and a windshield made from spoons. It was not grand, but it was honest. 2 children stood on the porch steps. The boy was slight, perhaps 8 or 9, with hair like Caleb's and a quick, curious expression. The girl, older, 13, maybe, crossed her arms over her chest and glared like Clara had arrived with shackles instead of a satchel. Caleb nodded toward them. "That's Emma," he said. "And the boy's Jonas." Clara offered a hesitant smile. Jonas gave a little wave, unsure. Emma turned and walked into the house without a word. That evening, Clara sat at the table and tried to eat stew that tasted like sage and smoke. Caleb spoke little, mostly to the children, though he looked to Clara often, eyes checking in, offering her a tether. Jonas asked her where she was from. She said, Illinois. He asked her if she'd ever seen a riverboat. She smiled and said, "Once when I was your age." Emma didn't speak at all. After the meal, Clara helped clear the table. She didn't know where anything belonged, and her hands fumbled with the dishes. Caleb leaned beside the sink and showed her how to pump the water. His shoulder brushed hers. It felt accidental, but not unwelcome. Later, in the room Caleb's late wife had once used for sewing, Clara sat on the edge of a narrow bed, unpinning her hair. The house creaked with old wood and memories. From the other side of the wall, she heard Emma's voice, angry and sharp. "She doesn't belong here. Mama's only been gone 3 years." And Caleb's reply, soft but firm, "Nobody's trying to replace your mama, Em. But no one's replacing your heart either." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She watched moonlight crawl across the window pane and felt like a stranger in her own skin. In town, word spread faster than fire on dry grass. By the time Clara returned with Caleb to the general store the next morning, people didn't bother whispering anymore. Mrs. Cantrell approached her directly, hands folded as if in mourning. "Mrs. Rowe," she said, drawing out the words, "you must understand folks are just surprised is all. A woman your age, coming from nowhere. It's brave, truly." Clara forced a smile. "Well, I was told Dust Hollow could use more bravery." Mrs. Cantrell stiffened. "Indeed. And discretion." Caleb returned with the supplies, didn't comment. But his hand found Clara's as they walked out the door. Over the next week, Clara tried to find her place. She swept the porch, even when the wind undid her work. She mended a ripped curtain in the parlor, burned the first 2 loaves of bread, then got the third just right. She brought eggs to the neighbor's wife across the creek, only to find they'd already been given by Emma. Clara tried to give the girl space, but space felt like a canyon some days. Jonas followed her like a shadow. He helped her in the garden when the frost finally lifted, asked questions about what life was like in the East. She told him stories, not grand ones, just small things. He laughed when she mentioned she once fell into a pond chasing a goose. His laughter made the house feel warmer. One afternoon, Clara tried to fix a splintered fence board herself. She held the hammer wrong and ended up striking her thumb so hard she saw stars. Emma watched from the porch. "You don't have to pretend," the girl said. Clara looked up, cradling her hand. "Pretend what?" "That you're one of us." Clara sat on the grass, holding back the tears threatening her composure. "I don't know how to be anything but myself." Emma's gaze faltered, but she didn't answer. She turned and walked inside, slamming the screen door behind her. Later, Clara sat at the kitchen table, thumb wrapped in a rag, when Caleb entered. "She's got my wife's fire," he said, sitting across from her. "I'm not trying to replace that," Clara replied. "I'm just trying not to get burned." He gave her a long look, then reached across the table and took her hand. "I didn't bring you here to make everything perfect. I brought you here because you didn't flinch. Not once. Not even when everyone else turned their back." Clara blinked hard. "You barely know me. Maybe. But I know enough. Enough to want to give this a chance." The next morning, Clara rose early and started on breakfast before the rest were awake. She fried potatoes, made biscuits from a recipe half remembered, and sliced apples with cinnamon. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm and made with intention. Emma took one bite, then pushed her plate back. "I'm not hungry," she said. Caleb frowned, but Clara held up a hand. "That's all right. Everyone eats when they're ready." Jonas said through a full mouth, "This is real good." That afternoon, while Caleb rode into town to meet with the farrier, Clara tried to hang laundry on the line. A gust of wind took one of Caleb's shirts and sent it flying into the pasture. She cursed under her breath, grabbed the hem of her skirt, and took off after it. Emma watched from the porch again, arms crossed. She said nothing until Clara returned, breathless, shirt in hand. "You look ridiculous running like that," the girl said. Clara looked at her, deadpan. "Well, better ridiculous than shirtless." The silence that followed was short, and broken by a small, reluctant snort from Emma. Clara smiled. "Progress. Maybe." That evening, Caleb came back from town with a hardened expression. "They were talking about you," he said. "Again. Said you conned me. Called you a charity bride." Clara nodded slowly. "I expected worse." "I didn't." "They're just scared of what they don't understand," Clara said, turning back to her stitching. "A woman who doesn't fit their mold. A man who doesn't need their approval. They don't know your worth." "No," she said softly. "But you're starting to." That night, Emma didn't slam the door. The next morning, Clara found a small note on her pillow, written in careful, crooked handwriting. "Thank you for not leaving. Emma." Clara folded it, tucked it into her pocket, and pressed her hand to her chest. She stepped outside, and for the first time since she arrived, she breathed in the prairie wind and smiled. She would not run. Not from this. Not now. The snow came in sudden, like it had been waiting just past the edge of the sky for the right moment to fall. It powdered the hills and blurred the distance, quieted the chickens, and silenced even the wind chimes on the row porch. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the white wash over the land like a sheet pulled tight. She held a cup of coffee that had gone cold in her hands. Caleb's voice came from behind her. Storm wasn't supposed to hit till tomorrow. It's early, Clara murmured. He set down a crate of firewood beside the stove and stretched his back, shoulders groaning with age and wear. That's the thing about Dust Hollow. Nothing ever comes right on time. Not storms. Not good fortune. Not even people. Clara looked at him, one brow raised. He smiled faintly. Except you. Her lips parted, surprised. But before she could respond, a loud slam echoed from the front door. Emma's boots stomped across the wooden floor, her cheeks pink with cold and frustration. They were laughing at me, she snapped. At school. Said Pa bought himself a used wife from the East. Clara's heart sank, but she didn't flinch. And what did you say back? I didn't say anything. I walked out. You walked home? In this. Emma didn't answer. Caleb rubbed a hand down his face. They'll keep talking, Em. That's what people do. It's not just them, Emma said, suddenly trembling. It's everyone. I keep hearing Mama's name like a ghost whispering. Every time I look at her chair, it's like I'm betraying her. Clara said nothing. The silence stretched long. Then, slowly, she walked over, kneeled before Emma, and spoke gently. You're not betraying her. You're grieving her. And that takes longer than anyone says. Emma's mouth quivered. She used to braid my hair before school. Clara reached out. Then maybe I can learn to do it the same way. Not to replace her. Just to remember her. But Emma jerked back, turned, and stomped off to her room. That night, the wind howled so loud it sounded like voices arguing just beyond the window glass. Caleb sat near the fire, whittling a piece of cedar into a horse for Jonas. Clara sat beside him, darning a torn mitten. Don't take it personal, he said after a while. I don't, she replied, even though she did. She's scared, he added. So scared she's turning her pain into claws. I know, Clara said. I just hope she doesn't cut too deep before she learns where to lay them down. The next morning, Emma was gone. Her bed untouched, her boots missing, her winter coat taken. A note lay on the kitchen table in shaky handwriting. I need to think. Don't come after me. Jonas cried when he read it. Caleb cursed once under his breath, then saddled his horse so fast Clara barely had time to grab her shawl. I'm going with you, she said. No. You stay. In case she comes back. Clara shook her head. I know that girl. She's hurt, not foolish. She didn't run off to hide. She ran off to feel something stronger than grief. Caleb hesitated, but then nodded. We head east, toward the creek. They searched for hours, the snow growing deeper by the minute. Clara's fingers went numb. Her nose stung with cold. They found nothing, no prints, no trail. Until just past the old mining road, Clara spotted something near a bent tree. A scrap of blue fabric snagged on a branch. Here, she called out, scrambling down the slope. They followed the path, weaving through thickets, until they reached a creek half frozen. The water a ribbon of silver beneath the ice. Emma sat at the bank, her knees drawn up, her arms wrapped around herself. Her coat was damp, her cheeks white, her lips trembling. Clara ran forward, knelt, and pulled her close. I'm sorry, Emma said. I thought maybe if I sat where Mama used to take us, I'd feel her again. But all I felt was cold. You should have told us where you were going, Caleb said, kneeling beside them. We were scared. Emma sniffled. I thought you'd be better off without me. Caleb caught her chin, gently. Don't you ever think that. They got her on the horse, wrapped in Caleb's coat. Clara rode behind her, arms locked tight around the girl's shivering body, whispering soft things that had no shape but held weight. When they got home, Clara built the fire higher, rubbed warmth back into Emma's hands, brewed tea with honey and mint. Later, when the girl finally slept, Caleb pulled Clara into the kitchen. I thought I lost her, he said, voice raw. And if I had, I don't know if I'd have known how to breathe again. Clara nodded, eyes wet. She's still here. And she came back with more than just frostbite. She came back with a beginning. The snow kept falling through the night. They didn't sleep. Around dawn, they heard the frantic knock on the door. It was Elias Moore, a neighbor half a mile off. His barn was ablaze, flames licking up the walls, his livestock in danger, his sons too small to help. Caleb was up and out the door before the man had finished his sentence. Clara grabbed coats, boots, water buckets. Emma stirred, eyes wide. "I want to help," she said. Clara looked at her, truly looked, and saw the fear in her, but also the will to face it. They rode hard through the snow. The barn was a bright orange wound against the pale world, smoke black as sin. Caleb and Elias ran for the well, shouting orders. Clara took buckets, formed a chain with the others. Emma followed, dragging heavy pails, slipping and rising again. The heat was intense. Sparks kissed Clara's hair and tried to eat her skirt. A horse screamed inside, and Elias cursed, turning to run back in. "You'll die in there," Caleb yelled, grabbing him. "I ain't letting that mare burn." Clara didn't think. She grabbed her shawl, drenched it in snow, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She ran into the fire. Smoke clawed at her lungs. Flames danced like angry spirits. She found the mare kicking in her stall, eyes wild. "It's all right," she whispered, soothing, though her heart thundered. "You're not alone." She unlatched the gate, tugged the rope, and stumbled back as the horse bolted into the snow. She barely made it out. Hands pulled her from the smoke. Caleb, his face stricken, his voice shaking. "You fool," he said. "You could've." "I didn't." Later, when the fire was finally out and only steaming wreckage remained, Emma came to her, arms full of a blanket. "You were brave," she said quietly. Clara laughed, winced. "No, just too stubborn to die." Emma wrapped the blanket around her and whispered, "I'm glad you didn't." When they returned home, Clara stood in front of the mirror, tracing the singe marks on her shawl, the soot on her skin. She looked older, fiercer, real. Caleb came up behind her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved her twice," he said. Clara met his eyes in the glass. "She saved me, too. Gave me someone to fight for." That night, they all sat around the hearth, silent but warm. Jonas fell asleep on the rug. Emma leaned into Clara's side without a word. Caleb played with his carving knife, but his eyes never left Clara's face. The fire crackled. The snow slowed. Outside, the world was still cold, but inside, something had started to thaw. The frost clung thick to the windows, painting each pane in quiet white lace as dawn broke over Dust Hollow. A silence lay across the land, not peace, but tension, the kind that settles in before something breaks. Clara Holden stirred the fire with slow, measured strokes, her hands rough from work and still faintly scarred from the barn blaze days ago. Her shawl was wrapped tight, but it wasn't the cold that made her feel the chill this morning. Caleb stood at the table, staring down at a piece of paper crumpled in his fist. His jaw was tight, his shoulders square with a tension that didn't come from farm work. "They're coming," he said. Clara turned. "Who?" "Harvey Black's boys. From over the ridge." The name dropped like a stone into still water. Harvey Black had once owned the neighboring property before his gambling debts, and a slow season had forced him to sell it off in pieces. Caleb had bought the land cheap, fair, and legal, but word was Harvey had never forgiven him. Now the old man was gone, but his sons, meaner than he ever was, had come to collect something that wasn't theirs. He sent word. Clara asked. Caleb shook his head, more like warning. Elias passed the message along. They planned to ride in by sundown. Clara set the poker down carefully. "What do they want?" "To scare us off. Burn what's left. Maybe worse." She crossed to him and took the paper from his hands. It wasn't a letter, just a rough sketch, a drawing of their homestead with a red X across it. Crude, childish, menace wrapped in charcoal lines. It trembled slightly in her grip. "Can we fight them?" she asked. Caleb hesitated. "I'll try. I've got my rifle. Elias and a few others'll stand with us if it comes to that." "And if it does?" He looked her in the eye. "We don't run." Emma stood in the doorway, thin as a reed but with fire in her eyes. Then neither do I. By noon, the sky had turned the color of tin. The snow had stopped falling, but what lay on the ground was enough to muffle steps, enough to leave no mistake if blood spilled. Clara worked fast, packing what needed hiding, feeding the fire, boiling water, filling lanterns. She cleaned Caleb's rifle like he'd shown her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. Emma helped gather tools that could serve as weapons. Axes, pitchforks, anything with a point or weight. Jonas, confused but obedient, stayed inside. He didn't ask many questions. Clara braided his hair and told him stories as the hours passed, even though her voice cracked around the edges. When she finished, he leaned into her side and whispered, "I don't want you to get hurt." "I don't want to either," she said. "But I will if it means keeping you safe." By the time the sun began to slip behind the hills, the air felt sharper. The fire popped like it knew something was coming. Caleb stood on the porch with his rifle slung low, a shadow stretching behind him. Clara joined him. "They'll expect weakness," he said. "Then we give them surprise." Emma came out next, holding her mother's old locket. She handed it to Clara. "You should wear this. If something happens, I want her close to someone who'd fight." Clara slipped it over her head, fingers trembling. "Thank you." They heard the hooves first, slow, heavy, deliberate. 4 riders. All tall, broad, wrapped in coats like wolves in sheep's wool. The lead man had a scar that split his cheek like a crack in dry earth. He pulled up just beyond the gate and smiled. "Evening," he said, like they were neighbors trading pie. Caleb stepped forward, calm but unreadable. "This land's mine. Used to be ours. Bought out when our old man was too deep in the bottle to see straight. You sold it fair." The scarred man's smile twisted. "Fair's a matter of who holds a gun." Another rider stepped forward, pulled a pistol from his belt, and leveled it casually at the ground. "We ain't here to argue. Just came to tell you it's time to pack up. We'll be back tomorrow, and anything left standing burns." Clara stepped forward. The men noticed her, surprised. She didn't look like a threat, just a woman in a worn dress and a shawl with soot-stained edges. But her voice was steel. "If you come back," she said, "you better bring more than 4 men. You'll find this house a lot harder to tear down than you think." The scarred man laughed. "What's this? The charity wife finds her tongue." Clara met his eyes without blinking. "I may have been left before, but I wasn't broken. And I damn sure won't be scared off by men who can't build anything of their own." He raised his pistol slowly, mockingly. Caleb took a step forward, rifle half-raised. But Elias appeared then from behind the barn, shotgun at the ready. Behind him, 3 more townsmen followed, one with a pitchfork, another with a lasso, and the last with a worn saber from an old war. The lead man looked around, taking in the numbers. Caleb said, quiet but firm, "Dust Hollow remembers its own." "You didn't count on that, did you?" Scarface clicked his tongue, then spit into the snow. "We'll see how long memory holds." He turned, gestured, and the riders wheeled away into the growing dark. Clara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her knees felt weak, but she stayed upright. That night, the house felt warmer than it ever had. Emma came to Clara after dinner, carrying a small, carved bird Jonas had made. "He wants you to have it. Said you're part of the flock now." Clara took it, tears welling. "I thought family had to come with blood," Emma said. "But I was wrong." Clara pulled her into a hug, heart aching with a joy too fragile to hold fully. Outside, Caleb chopped more firewood. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. Clara watched him through the window, then stepped out onto the porch. "You didn't have to let me stay," she said. He turned. "You didn't have to marry me. I didn't do it for shelter." "I know." There was a pause. Then he stepped forward, close. "I fell in love with you the moment you didn't flinch," he said. "And then again every day after." She reached up, touched his face. "Then let's not waste what we've started," she whispered. He kissed her, soft, unhurried, like a man claiming not possession, but promise. The next morning, the frost was thick again, but the fire inside the hearth roared steady. Clara made breakfast while the kids laughed in the other room. Caleb came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pressed his forehead to her neck. The locket still hung from her throat. The carved bird sat on the windowsill. Outside, smoke curled gently from the chimney, rising into a sky so clear it hurt to look at. Somewhere down the road, the black boys would nurse their wounded pride and likely never come back. But it didn't matter. They'd already lost the one thing they didn't understand. A woman who'd been abandoned, who'd been judged too late and too plain, had stood, fought, and stayed. And in that staying, had lit a fire in a house that once held only silence. A fire no frost could put out.